Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, my great and good friend. Welcome back to the Solid Verbal College Football Podcast. You have a good weekend? You ready to go? You excited for the show? It's good to see you as always. You look beaming. What say you?
Had a good weekend. Some sports. We actually went to the Northwestern Oregon basketball game. The boys were rooting for Oregon, who lost on a buzzer beater. And I had one kid in tears, and I had one kid, the younger one, the 5-year-old, yelling from the upper deck, accusing Northwestern of cheating. And we had a first grade basketball game last night. Everything's great, Ty. I'm living the life.
You should take him to a Michigan game, man. He'd be in good company.
I don't have that kind of scratch, Ty, to get Michigan tickets. They're a top 5 team, right?
I don't know.
They were just here.
No
they
idea.
Lost to Duke in Chicago. So
I'm just saying, if you're gonna have a youngling call out cheating, you might be in the wrong spot.
Oh, that's true. But like that's a great introduction to college sports, right? Losing and then accusing the other team of somehow, subverting the rules to get their win. I think that's great. But yeah, Oregon's basketball team is not having its best season this year, but it was still fun to get out there and watch some Big Ten basketball.
And I think get confirmation that you're raising your sons correctly.
Yeah, they cared. They were locked in and they cared. It was really fun.
Well, welcome back in, one and all. Hit follow, hit subscribe if that diatribe wasn't a little too much for you. It's great to have you back here twice a week, all throughout the offseason. Obviously, as we get a little bit closer to all of the madness in the 2026 regular season, a little bit later on this year, as we get into the summer, that's when we'll flip the switch and go to 3 episodes per week. But in the interim, you've got Dan and I every Tuesday and Thursday. If you want to support the team beyond just hitting the follow or subscribe button, which of course is free, you can go out to verballers.com. That is our Patreon. If you want to directly support the team, you can also go to merch.solidverbal.com. I had a bunch of orders come in.
Oh, nice.
Actually, over the last few weeks. Yeah, it's great. That, of course, goes directly to Dan and I as well. What are we talking about today, Dan?
We are talking about, because it's not really spring, so it's not really spring cleaning, but it's an opportunity to talk about coordinators, and we're sort of steering into home improvement because, we're locking in, I believe, mostly, if not entirely, on coordinators that were hired to coach under pre-existing head coaches, right?
Right.
And I think it's largely that you have, I think, one who is coaching under a head coach, but has experience under that head coach already.
I couldn't, when people hear it, they'll understand why. I couldn't help myself.
I know, that's okay. There's enough returning at that school where you can sort of diagnose where the improvement is needed. So that's what we're doing. We're like, okay, this guy was hired to improve X, Y, and Z that was deficient last season, the 2025 season, or maybe the past couple of seasons under a previous coordinator or previous system. And these are the responsibilities. This is what the schedule looks like. This is what the roster looks like. This is what the depth chart does or doesn't look like. And we're looking at it in terms of what kind of home improvement job is at hand. Is it a full gut renovation? Are we just looking at a couple rooms that need updating that look a little bit too much like the 70s or 80s? Are we looking at just a cosmetic improvement here where we're just like, oh, we got to tinker there, maybe update some finishes, something like that. So we're attacking the new coordinator home improvement jobs at hand. Yes?
I think that was a sufficient description, of course.
Yeah, we got to protect the honor and dignity of this defense or offense. Yeah.
Got to protect the house. If you've got something to say in response to any of this, solidverbal@gmail.com, or hit us up on any of the comment threads that are available to you. Had a bunch of emails come in lately as well. Now that I fixed the damn form on the website, we've had a bunch of new ones come in. I've been staying on top of them. We've had a bunch of good suggestions here for content that we can address here in the off season. So just know that that's not falling on deaf ears. We're going to do our part to incorporate as much as we can here and make the off season as fun as possible. Why don't you kick this off? Because when we had our normally scheduled production call on Friday afternoon, this was your idea. This whole idea was due to Dan Rubenstein. So play the sound and give me your first coordinator, and let's have a conversation here about what needs to get fixed to protect the house adequately.
Will you protect this house?
I will. Yeah.
I will.
The first one I want to do is one of the more Toe's all interesting coordinators to me. So, it's our show and that's what I do. The first one I want to talk about is Gary Patterson at USC.
Okay.
Gary Patterson with a history of running a sometimes pretty good, sometimes very good, sometimes unbeatable 4-2-5, utilizing a lot of speed. Remember a lot of the NFL players that he helped to develop at TCU. Last few years, he's been sort of a consultant, an associate type coach for a couple of different teams, Baylor and Texas. And he's brought in to USC to sort of build upon the best of what D'Anton Lynn had to offer as he improved this team to a top 50-ish defense a couple years ago, took a step back last year, mostly because of an extremely leaky run defense. The linebackers weren't there. The defensive line consistency was not there. They were fine at times, but in their biggest games, they were not fine. And corner was a struggle, and they obviously dealt with a lot of health stuff on defense. Gary Patterson is coming in with, I think, a lot to work with. Some of it mysterious via a terrific recruiting class that's coming in, and I don't think there'll be a lot of contributors there or big contributors there right away, especially not up front. Maybe in the back seven somewhere along there, you might see some rotation guys. It's an experienced defensive line. Linebacker is new. Safety is new. Cornerback has experience. To me, I think the foundation is there, but there's a lot of updating needed. I think the floors need to be redone, Ty. I think there's some drywall patching that needs to happen.
Do we want to do this? Do we want to equate it to actual home renovations?
We don't have to. That's just where my mind went with USC.
I mean, we are two homeowners, so it's not too
true.
far beyond us if we want to go in that direction, but continue.
Yes. The difficulty is the offenses that they're facing this year, especially in that middle part of the schedule, is Oregon, Washington. They're at Penn State. Who knows what that offense is? Kind of mysterious. At Wisconsin, who knows? But they have a promising quarterback, an athletic quarterback. Ohio State should be very good. Indiana's on the road. UCLA is, quote unquote, on the road, but interesting pieces on that offense at the very least. So a lot of weatherproofing needed, Ty. On the outside element of these things. I think there is work to be done, but especially because of the experience on the defensive line and the depth potentially on the defensive line, I think there's a solid foundation there that we don't need to overreact to the like a crazy amount of work. Like, I don't think a crazy amount of work is needed to get USC back to like the 40s or 50s nationally. I look at points per drive, but whatever metric you prefer, that vague area of the rankings, I think USC can ascend to, especially because their offense is not just going to be a waste, right? They're not going to put their defense in a bad position. Their offense should perform given what they return. I mean, the receiver is new, whatever, but I think Gary Patterson does not have a gut job in front of him, but has a good amount of work.
He's 66 years old.
Yeah.
He's been out of a full-time coaching role since 2021.
Yeah.
About 5 years, give or take.
Yeah, left in the middle of the year. It was a disastrously injured defense that year. And roster.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we bring this point up often, if only because college football has changed so much and we do see some of the older guard leaving the sport. There is a question about, are the players going to buy in? What will his intensity be with respect to the role, with respect to just where college football is at? Because it is a little bit different, but dude was a pioneer for a while with like a 4-2-5 defense that he ran at TCU. His defenses led the nation in total defense like 5 times, something crazy. I mean, he's obviously very, very accomplished in this regard. I think the handoff from D'Anton Lynn to Gary Patterson is really interesting because D'Anton Lynn definitely deserves some credit for dragging the USC defense out of the gutter that it was in after Alex Grinch.
Yep.
Right. I mean, he dramatically improved that unit in 2024. Last season, you're right to bring up some of the deficiencies. They just found themselves all too often overpowered in the trenches against better competition.
Yeah. Yeah. They were their ability to pressure the quarterback kind of disappeared. The run defense didn't exist. And on third down, they took a major step back as well.
So I'm curious to see what Patterson brings to this now. I'm curious to see if he feels he's got the personnel in place to run the system that he is comfortable with. I don't think you're going to out-scheme Gary Patterson. I think Gary Patterson knows what he's doing on that side of the football.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, if you're Lincoln Riley, bringing in a guy who, you don't have to train Gary Patterson on the job. Gary Patterson knows what he's doing from a defensive standpoint. For me, it's really just a question of, do they have the personnel in place to execute what Patterson wants to do? And that we're just going to have to wait and see on that front. I think there's enough back to feel encouraged about it. And I don't outright hate the hire. It definitely, for me, came a little bit out of left field.
Right.
But at the same time, knowing that you've got somebody with a wealth of knowledge, I believe a Hall of Fame pedigree, right? Like,
sure.
You're putting a guy like that in a spot like this where talent should not be in short supply. It's just a question of, can the talent do what he wants? I'd be willing to take that risk.
And look,
the only final point here, just specifically with regard to that personnel question, given his schemes over the years, he's really been known for running like a hybrid safety, like a linebacker prototype, somebody who can execute against spread offenses and whatnot. Can kind of do both, right? Can play the pass, can play the run. I'm curious to see how he utilizes that position in this USC defense in 2026.
Yep. And a lot of assistant changes along this defense for USC. It's new safeties coach, new linebackers / special teams, new defensive line with Eric Henderson leaving, new outside linebackers coach. So there is a lot new to this year's USC defense, including, by the way, Jontez Williams, one of the, I think, headline defensive
from
backs
Iowa State.
From Iowa State got hurt last season. We talked about the rash of injuries to Iowa State's defense. He's a big deal. He's a big deal when fully healthy, and could certainly add star power to this defense. But yeah, is there a Jerry Hughes, playing edge type player? You look at the string of NFL type defensive backs for TCU. They had a couple of those at safety last year, not here this season. And so hasn't been a full-time coordinator, an only coordinator in 26 years. So I think it's a risky contractor hire, Ty. How about that? I think there is some risk to it.
There is some risk. I don't hate it, though.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not like you're bringing somebody up from FCS. You're bringing someone out of retirement.
Right.
But it is somebody who, if you've ever seen Gary Patterson on any of those coaches cam segments that they do on ESPN, I mean, the dude is a mad scientist when it comes to defense. So you're not going to like outsmart him. For me, it's a question of, commitment. It's a question of personnel. But at least you're plugging and playing somebody with got a ton of expertise.
Yes.
On the defensive side of the ball. So give me the sound. Give me that sound.
Who do you have?
I want to talk about Will Muschamp, Dan.
Okay. Let's.
Will Muschamp got a 3-year, $8.4 million fully guaranteed contract from Texas to come in and be defensive coordinator. Yeah. He replaces Pete Kwiatkowski. You may recall that Texas went 10-3 last season. Narrowly missed the college football playoff. Had high expectations. We definitely fed into that. At least I definitely fed into that in the preseason.
Yep.
But Pete Kwiatkowski relieved of command. They're going in a bit of a different direction. I was a little bit surprised by that, actually.
Okay. Pete Kwiatkowski in 2024, Pete Kwiatkowski and Texas together.
Right.
Had the number 1 points per drive allowed defense in 2024. They 100% definitely had a down year by their standards last year. Do you know what their ranking last year fell all the way?
20th. Yeah.
Can you imagine only having the 20th best defense? So a luxurious place, but obviously these hires are not necessarily made based solely on, a specific metric. There's personality
And-
issues, there's fit issues. I'm not saying that this is the case, but a lot goes into a change like this.
And I think that's my point.
Yeah.
Because for a great number of the people we're going to talk about on today's episode, you can point to a number thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, that, they had to fix that. I don't know if that's so much the case here with Texas. This was a young Texas defense in 2025. It was not a bad Texas defense, but notably it did struggle down the stretch. Right as the offense was starting to find its groove, let's say, towards the latter part of October into the latter stages of November, that is when the defense sort of went in the opposite direction. There was like a 5-week stretch there where they were giving up a lot of points. To me, this is a change that is way more about philosophy than it is about schematics.
Yeah.
You're not going to believe this when I say it about Will Muschamp, so I want you to hang on to your seat.
Please.
Will Muschamp runs a more aggressive attacking defense than his predecessor, Pete Kwiatkowski.
Yeah.
Pete Kwiatkowski was much more bend, don't break. That was just his philosophy. For what it's worth, I think Sark always wanted to hire Will Muschamp when he got the job back in 2021, but the timing didn't quite work out. At the time, Will Muschamp was, in between jobs, wanted to spend more time with his family, wanted to watch his kids play high school football.
Mm-hmm.
But now, kids are out of high school. Now the kids are playing college ball. And so if you're Sark, you're looking at this roster, as I did before we hit go here. And I think the most logical conclusion is that the championship window is open right now, dog.
Yeah, I mean, if
Look
you're
at this
spending
roster.
like it is, yeah.
Look at this roster.
Mm-hmm.
I know they lost some guys, but look at what they brought in. This roster is loaded. Now, the schedule, Dan, how would you describe the schedule in the SEC, just out of curiosity?
Gauntlet.
It is a gauntlet. It is a gauntlet. So if I'm Sark, and if I'm looking at what I have coming back in 2026, and I'm looking at this schedule, I think it is a completely logical conclusion to say, I need a defense that is going to play on the front foot and is not going to be waiting and reacting to what the opponent is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, that seems like a great way to go 9-3 again, to take a loss maybe that you don't want. There are going to be a couple on this schedule, but I want a defense that's a little bit better at dictating terms, that's playing on the front foot, and that is setting the tone. And I think that is what you get with Will Muschamp.
Okay.
Will Muschamp is many things, some of which are even meme-worthy. But Will Muschamp has never been known for playing any kind of passive style of defense. This is something that is built on pressure. It is built on playing downhill. So, look, early reports I think are pretty encouraging, just from what I've been able to ascertain going out there and reading what players have had to say about Will Muschamp and the system and what it appears the new philosophy is going to be. I will admit it did come a little bit out of left field for me when they let go of Coach Quitt, because he's also very highly respected and has done a pretty good job, I think, over the years, most recently now at this Texas defense. I don't know if it was so much anything he was doing wrong. I just think it was more of a philosophical shift that Sark felt he wanted to go in the direction of a little bit more aggression on defense. By the way, this is one time where our longstanding joke here about being aggressive and attacking is actually a thing that they were going for.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very clear. It's not just a buzzword that we say in this context. This is something that Sark, I think, wanted to add to the repertoire at Texas. And I agree. I think given where they're at with all the talent they've got on hand, this was probably the right move at the right time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Muschamp can do. Obviously, this is a bit of a homecoming for him as well, being so he was at Texas way back when. I think this is a really good fit at the right time, and I'm just curious to see what this looks like again against this. What type of schedule, Dan, in the SEC? Gauntlet of a schedule, thank you.
Interestingly, look, if Texas felt like they needed to make a change on defense, they didn't seem to at least aggressively feel like it was a roster issue. Now, they've kind of struggled to recruit and develop, some defensive linemen, especially defensive tackles internally as they've gone to the portal. I mean, what teams feel like they need to improve on in terms of a roster with what they go out and sign in the portal. And it seemed that Texas was much more eager to bring in offense this cycle. When you look at what they brought in along the line, and Hollywood Smothers and Ray Leak Brown, Cam Coleman obviously did not come cheap.
No.
They looked at that, and I would even say that when you look at where they were last year, a lot of what ailed them in some of those bigger games was not necessarily only on the defense. Like, you look at the final score of the Georgia game, the offense could not do anything against Georgia, right? You look at, Vanderbilt came back and made a game of it late, but the defense, by and large, played well until they didn't, and it was a secondary thing, and it was an injury thing last year for Texas, and everybody deals with it. But they finished the season strong over Texas A&M on defense, and I think if there is more cohesion and consistency to this offense, obviously the defense is going to benefit. So, their starting point is good on defense. Colin Simmons, having either the best or one of the 3 or 4 best rush ends in the country is a great starting point with the experience they return on all those levels. So, it'll be difficult to screw up, it seems, though they do play in a gauntlet of a conference. Yeah.
They play in a gauntlet.
Yeah.
All right, give me the sound. Give me the sound.
Will you protect this house?
All right. I want to throw this one back at you.
Please.
I jotted these two guys down on my sheet, but this part of the conversation is intended to be a little bit more interactive, not just me talking at you.
Yeah, of course.
Oregon.
Sure.
Oregon's got 2 new coordinators. 2 new coordinators because Will Stein left to take the Kentucky job, from Louisville.
Yep.
And Chris Hampton promoted from within to backfill the void left by Tosh Lupoi, who's taken over at Cal. Drew Mehringer is your new offensive coordinator. Chris Hampton is the DC. You and I have talked about this, I think, a little bit more off air. And I had questions for you about Mehringer initially. Is it Mehringer or Mehringer?
Okay, so he went to Rice? I'm pretty sure. Unless that's a different one. I've heard it both. I think
Okay.
it's Jur.
Mehringer, sure.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
Okay. He brings back, I think, more than enough talent. That part kind of goes without saying on the Oregon side. The roster is loaded. The offense is loaded. The question that I know you and I have discussed here off air is, in going from one coordinator to another, what changes on the Oregon side? And I think your response in the past has been, it's basically going to be the same offense. There might be some wrinkles here and there, but by and large, with the talent that's returning and with the offense that has operated at a really high level, it's going to look mostly the same as they promote from within. Now, granted, just because the offense is going to stay mostly the same doesn't mean it's always going to work.
Right.
But I think from a high level, a couple months out, I look at the offense, I say it's mostly going to look the same with the talent that they've got coming back.
Yes.
And then on the defensive side of the ball,
Mm-hmm.
this is another instance where it seems as if Dan Lanning is prioritizing some sort of continuity, right? That said, they do have some guys they got to replace.
Mm-hmm.
Some big names that need to be replaced. The leading tackler, Dylan Thieneman. I saw Dylan Thieneman was running like crazy at the combine.
4-3, yeah.
So there are a couple of key pieces defensively that I think we can discuss here, and how Chris Hampton is able to plug those gaps and what it looks like schematically. But how did you feel as an Oregon guy with what Lanning did here to backfill these 2 spots? Because, again, they needed 2 new coordinators.
Yeah. I thought the defensive coordinator promotion was not a surprise at all. That made sense to me.
Okay.
Chris Hampton, has experience as a coordinator, was at Tulane with Willie Fritz before. And I think he's just super well regarded, and the secondary has been good. And has recruited well. Like, I think he's he fits like a glove in terms of making sense of that hire. Linebacker needs to get better. We'll see on the defensive line depth, but I don't think anybody has any real serious questions that this Oregon defense can be good once again, at the very least. Offensively, it's interesting. Drew Mehringer has, if it is Drew Mehringer, has experience calling offenses, sometimes decently, sometimes less so. He is on the Tom Herman tree, going back to Iowa State, Ohio State, and Texas. So was there Sam Ellinger? The best of Sam Ellinger was Drew Mehringer involved with it. They return too much. It would be so difficult to screw this offense up. It would be so difficult. If look, the offensive line should work out. It's a lot of, internal promotions, losing a couple guys. They brought in a guy from, I want to say Yale, who may start at right tackle. They should be stacked at running back. Receiver should be a great room. Tight end, even without Kenyon Sadiq, should be in a good place with Jamari Johnson. I think the big thing is, and he has experience coaching quarterbacks, and there is, I think, an internal promotion in terms of quarterbacks coach. The big question for Oregon to take the next step is Dante Moore.
Right.
It's almost like, what can you get out of Dante Moore that he couldn't do in the biggest games last season? And that's the big question, because he didn't have a great game against Texas Tech. He obviously didn't have a great game, especially initially against Indiana, and then the end of the Indiana game in the first instance. So it's what kind of, and he was probably promoted at least partially because he's fluent in this Oregon offense. And so that makes things easier for Dante Moore, that you don't have to sell him on a stranger. And so I get it, but I wonder if this is the absolute best that they could do. Maybe it's the absolute best thing they could do for the guys there.
So that's my question.
Right.
My big question is, was this truly the best that they could do? Or was this more of a strategic decision? Knowing what they've got on the roster, knowing that you got another year of Dante Moore, knowing that they're going to be one of the top, probably 6-7 teams in the country at a minimum going into next season, you don't necessarily want to upset the apple cart too much and put yourself in a spot where guys are learning new verbiage, guys are learning new everything when you've got a ready-built playoff caliber roster right now.
Yeah. Look, it's a great question. And by the way, the quieter part of this all is, if Dante Moore rolls an ankle, how quickly does he get Dylan Raiola up to speed, right? How good of a teacher can he be? And the new quarterbacks, I think it's Koa Kai is the, sounds like Cobra Kai, right? The new quarterbacks coach, who is a former Oregon tight end himself, how quickly is he able to teach this offense should he need to? First year on the job. So in this job, look, I think it's a big swing, and this is a year with what Oregon's bringing back on both sides in terms of seniors and upperclassmen. It's all in, man. It's all in with this type of promotion and paying what they are for, the guys coming back.
They're on the road at USC. They're on the road at Ohio State.
Yeah.
They're home the following week against Michigan, and then they close out the season at home in Autzen against a Washington squad that I think should be pretty decent. They've also got Boise State to open up their season on September the 5th. That one's in Autzen. Who knows what they get in week 2 on the road at Oklahoma State? It's going to be a different Oklahoma State squad. We'll find out pretty quick what that defense is made of, I'm assuming, at least on the passing front. But I don't look at this schedule and feel the same way I do about the Texas schedule. But there are some landmines on here. And if the defense, I think the defense will remain solid. But if, in fact, there's going to be any kind of hiccups on here, there are a couple offenses that I look at and I say, all right, these are some squads that I think could test them.
Yes, but on the flip side, there is only one obviously good defense on this schedule.
There is.
And so if you're talking about Drew Mehringer and Dante Moore or whatever, and the wealth that they should have at receiver and running back, doesn't mean that there won't be more. But in terms of, we don't know what Michigan's is going to be like. We don't know Washington. Yeah. We don't know USC. So we know Ohio State is going to field a good defense at the very least. There's one, and that's a good starting point, it seems.
Give me the sound, Dan.
Will you protect this house? I will.
I want to go over to Arkansas.
Yeah.
Do we think it's Ron Roberts or Ron Robert?
It's the eternal question, Robert.
Yeah.
It's Ron Roberts. I actually really like this hire for Arkansas, and
So do I. I really like this, actually. The more I looked at it and thought about it, and this is one of those cases where we, I guess, kind of veered away from our initial rules, and it is a new coach, new coordinators across the board, but Ron Roberts in particular is a really interesting hire for me. I'm curious why you feel that way.
Okay, so he runs a 4.25. His institutional knowledge, having coached both in the region at Louisiana, at Baylor in Texas, and then Auburn, Florida. His institutional knowledge of the SEC is high to very high. His results, I think Florida fans, for the most part, and they were dealing with a lot last season, especially once it was an interim situation in Gainesville. But I really do think Ron Roberts did a good job in Gainesville.
He did
for
a
the
really
most
good
part.
job,
So,
I thought.
I think the vibes are good with Ron Roberts. And the big thing that Arkansas is doing in an interesting way is I think they brought in something like 40 plus total transfers in the first Ryan Silverfield class. So this is, we don't know what specifically he's going to fix because everything needs to be fixed.
Everything needed.
Do you know how hard it is to have a bad defense with an elite rushing attack? Do you know how much easier it is when you're able to control the ball and you're good on third downs on offense? It does so many favors for your own defense. And Arkansas's defense was still trash last year. And so the Arkansas portal strategy, at least, seemed to be, let's go after highly regarded recent recruits. Guys that are redshirt freshmen, sophomores or something who really didn't see the field that much but ended up at big places. And so they're bringing in a mix of those guys, especially up front. Zadavian Sims from Oregon, Trajan Odom from Ohio State. They brought in a well-regarded corner from Tulane, who actually played well at Tulane. But it's just a giant mystery. This is a full gut renovation job. And I think there's a reason why they spent, I think he's like one of the 8 or 9 highest paid coordinators in the sport. It's like around $2 million, which means 1, he was in demand, and 2, Arkansas found their guy and was willing to pay whatever it was going to take to sign their guy. So this is from the studs, but it's easier in 2026 to do that. It's easier if you were able to open the coffers, which Arkansas hasn't always been able to do. We'll see if this specific strategy works out for them. But if the bodies are there, if Ron Roberts continues to be a good teacher, schedule's difficult for Arkansas, gauntlet. But in terms of controlling what they can control, I think they found a really good contractor. Look, it's to the studs, it's foundation, it's flooring, it's the roof, it's the backyard. Everything needs a ton of attention from this Arkansas defense because, once again, they had the offense last year. They were competitive last year. They just couldn't get stops. Ever. There was a lot of losing 41-38s or 38-35s, that type of season for Arkansas. So if you're the Hogs, and obviously this athletics department has shown a willingness to pay, they bring in Ryan Silverfield, whose history of defenses is not great, but
and that's I thought that's where you're going to go with this, but that's where I'll go with this. Ron Roberts, I think, is already on the record. Maybe I just made this up, but I believe he's on the record saying something to the effect of the defense looked disconnected. Yeah. Which we know. We know. You read off the numbers. We know. Okay. That part I think is pretty evident. He's also on record saying that they need a cultural reboot on defense in terms of discipline, in terms of effort. Again, not exactly a surprise if you look at these numbers. What I like about Ron Roberts, though, is he's very much regarded as like a coach's coach.
Yeah.
He's kind of regarded as an innovator.
Yeah.
In this space. Runs a very complex defense. It's based a lot around confusing quarterbacks, sim pressures, things of that nature. I think Aranda, Pete Golding, a bunch of other guys who run similar versions of it.
He was a coordinator for Aranda at Baylor and had a top 20 defense. Yeah. Exactly.
Like all these guys are sort of interconnected in terms of their ideas on the defensive side of the ball. Whenever I hear that somebody runs a complex defense and they're starting from square one and they're coming in and they're part of a reboot, that always gives me cause for pause or favorite pet charity. Mm-hmm. I don't like hearing that because to me, that sounds like it's going to be hard to learn.
Right.
Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily if you get the results. But Ron Roberts to me is a little bit different because he does have a track record for coming in, albeit with however complex the defense is, and stabilizing a sinking ship.
Yeah.
And we saw him do that at Florida recently. Did a good job, right? At first, he was a co-defensive coordinator with Austin Armstrong. Then he was just the guy.
Yeah.
Because he did such a good job. So from my standpoint, if you're going out there, if you're willing to spend the money, if you're bringing in guys that were highly sought out by other programs that I think we hold up to a pretty high standard defensively, and now you're bringing in somebody with this track record who can organize the troops in very, very short order and run something that's going to confuse opposing offenses, sign me up.
Yeah.
Sign me up. I think it's a good move. I like the fact that he's got a ton of experience, and I think Arkansas needs to get to a point where they are not constantly in a volatile situation. Not just on defense, but just across the board. They need some stability at this program so that they can start recruiting the way that they want, so that they can start actually building something and not just jumping from portal cycle to portal cycle the way it feels they've been over the last couple of years.
Yeah, there's a lot of like...
I'm curious here. I like this move. Arkansas's got a ways to go, but if Ron Roberts can come in and do half of what he has done at some other stops, and granted, they haven't all been sparkling, but just half of what we have seen him do in the past, the improvement should be relatively obvious, and I'm excited about that.
There's a little bit of Kevin Steele to this hire, right?
Yes.
Somebody who's coached at a bunch of places in the area, somebody who you can count on to get at least a low floor result. The Arkansas roster is going to look different than some of the rosters that Ron Roberts or Kevin Steele has had, and that's, the Jimmies and Joes thing is going to be a little bit different in Fayetteville in year one. But yeah, I don't expect, as whatever the words are, disconnected, disjointed. I don't expect that. I would imagine if there's any single problem for Arkansas is just that when you have a schedule that has LSU and whatever Auburn is and Georgia and Texas.
Right. Speaking of gauntlets, right?
And they're at Utah, whatever Utah is this season. That's part of the non-conference slate. That you might not have the too deep to really compete week in and week out, but I would imagine being disjointed or disconnected is not going to be an issue.
Give me the sound, Dan.
Please.
Will you protect this house? I will.
You mentioned Utah. Let's talk about Jason Beck, the new offensive coordinator who comes from Utah.
Yeah.
Was taken over at Michigan. What was your first thought when Kyle Whittingham got the job at Michigan, just with respect to Bryce Underwood?
An interesting fit, but will be put in a position where he's not going to be counted on to play hero ball for Michigan to win games, which I think is ultimately a good thing, that he could, in the best possible scenario, can develop in an upward direction, even though Kyle Whittingham quarterbacks haven't necessarily been synonymous with the first couple days of the NFL draft.
Right, and that's the cause for pause, the favorite pet charity. Is Kyle Whittingham the guy who's going to develop this quarterback? Highly regarded, much sought after, originally committed elsewhere, decides to stay close to home and go to Michigan.
Right.
This is not a coach that has that recent track record. But Jason Beck is interesting. The case study on Jason Beck is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. He does prefer the power run attack. Pretty balanced, I would say, over the course of his career. He definitely had the rushing attack going at Utah. But now I think what's going to be interesting to see is this interplay between the coordinator, Beck, and Bryce Underwood. Again, the highly regarded blue chip quarterback.
Yes.
I think bigger picture, Michigan's going to be fine. Bigger picture, Michigan will be fine because Kyle Whittingham is, just in terms of football prowess and coaching, Kyle Whittingham is light years better than Sharon Moore. And I don't think there's much debate over that.
There is not.
The pressure is going to be on Beck to see what kind of system he can put around Bryce Underwood and, moreover, keep him in Ann Arbor beyond this year. Mm-hmm. You don't want a transfer portal situation. What I like about this hire, Jason Beck actually has a very good track record for developing quarterbacks into guys who can guys who can produce at a really high clip. He coached Brennan Armstrong back in the day when he was at Virginia. Remember those days? Brennan Armstrong?
Yeah, great season.
He developed Devin Dampier into what he was at New Mexico before bringing him up to Utah. He even had something of a role in mentoring guys like Taysom Hill, Tanner Mangum at BYU. So those are a bunch of different quarterbacks. It's not like this is a one-trick pony who's going to solely want to build it around a power rushing attack and turn a quarterback into a game manager or anything like that. That is not what Jason Beck's track record shows us. It shows us, if anything, that he's pretty versatile and he's worked with a bunch of different types of quarterback. Now, there is a coach in front of him running the show, and Kyle Whittingham, who, he will ultimately have the final say over what this offense is. But I think Beck's got a good enough track record that they're not going to put like a run-heavy shell over Bryce Underwood. I expect that it's going to be a system built around Underwood, and that he's likely going to want to try and unlock some of that arm talent. Dude's got a howitzer to try and push things down the field. They're going to have more talent on offense. It should mean good things for Jordan Marshall, who's still there.
Yeah.
In the running back room. But there should be an element of explosivity to this offense, knowing that Jason Beck is running this thing and that he's been able to work with a bunch of different skill sets over his career. So he was highly regarded pretty much every stop along the way. The fact that Michigan now gets him as part of what I'm considering an upgrade with Kyle Whittingham, to me, is a good sign for Bryce Underwood, but I do need to see it. And again, I caution anybody about getting too excited about this, because in the world that we live in now, it doesn't take much to lose that quarterback a year from now. And if we know anything about where the portal's at, people would want Bryce Underwood. They'd pay him whatever.
Of course.
So he needs to do enough and prove enough here in year one that the system they're putting around him is not only going to win games, but develop him into an NFL talent.
Yeah. And look, in defense of whatever Utah was or wasn't on offense, right? You run what your roster dictates you can run. And part of that is on you. Part of that is not always on you. And they were not able to attract and develop huge, big-time receivers at Utah. And that's on them partially. The receiver position and broader pass catching and offensive skill situation at Michigan is pretty good right now.
I would agree.
It's Tyler Buchanan, obviously Andrew Marsh coming back, and I don't think he had a catch against Ohio State, but in terms of where tight end is, running back, bringing back the offensive line that they brought back, we know what Bryce Underwood's ceiling could look like potentially. The pass catching situation in Ann Arbor, I think it's Jamie French coming in from Texas. He was a 5-star-ish.
French with 2 Fs.
Double F.
Double
Didn't really catch on at all at Texas with that recruiting profile, but they're sort of investing in this. And also they're paying Jason Beck nearly $3 million. So they're not going to pay Jason Beck $3 million and say, here is the offensive vibes we want. You're paying him because you want his vibes. And so I would be pretty thrilled with the upside of this Michigan offense if I were a Michigan fan, considering the personnel and what's coming back and what we now know about what was happening behind the scenes with the Michigan coaching staff last season, that if we have a sort of unencumbered, fresh slate for this Michigan offense, that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, you read a lot about accountability when you go through all of these coordinators and their comments on the record after being hired, after giving their assessment of what they saw on tape. But I really think this is a situation, knowing what we know now, with bringing Whittingham in, Beck coming along, obviously bringing over a pretty well-established defensive coordinator from BYU as well to join the staff. It definitely seems as though Michigan is getting that accountability side of it. And if it wasn't there over the last year and a half at Michigan, it would be interesting to see what it looks like now if they've got some stronger guardrails in place just from a personnel standpoint to hopefully shepherd this thing through.
Counterpoint, Ty. How difficult will it be for this Michigan team to score 27 points or so against the following defenses on their schedule?
Gauntlet.
And speaking of gauntlet,
it's a really tough schedule. This is really
Oklahoma in Ann Arbor, Iowa in Ann Arbor, Penn State in Ann Arbor, Indiana in Ann Arbor, so that's nice. But then
great home slate.
It's a great home slate the first half of the 2/3 of the schedule, but they do finish at Oregon, UCLA, and then it's UCLA and Ann Arbor, and then at Ohio State. So they've got a bunch of what could be strong to very strong defenses. To again, you're going to have to probably score 25, 28, 31 against a lot of those teams if you want a shot. And so they have their work cut out for them because on paper they look like they should take a leap forward, but that's a big ask. That sheer number of probably good defenses is it's tough.
Hit the sound.
Will you protect this house?
Let's stay in the Big Ten. Let's talk about a coordinator who came out of a 5-day retirement from Montana to take this job that opened up pretty late in the game because their former defensive coordinator is now coaching at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I am talking about Bobby Hauck at Illinois, Dan Rubenstein.
Yeah.
Runs a 3-3-5. It's never been used at Illinois per Brett Bielema. He's hoping that it creates some confusion among their opponents in the Big Ten. But Bobby Hauck going to be the new DC at Illinois. What do you have to say?
I think there is a lot positive about this hire. I like guys coming in and sort of shaking things up, especially when there's a lot up in the air in terms of personnel with portal guys coming in. I mean, we pointed to 2025 as an Illinois season, given what they were returning. That's where the hype came from, that they were returning what they were on both sides of the ball. Headline on defense by Gabe Akis, who's now off to the NFL, linebacker. And so now they're sort of starting from scratch. There's new guys on all three levels. The guys they're bringing in from the portal are like not risky, but there's not a lot of tape. There's not a lot of like, oh, this guy was all conference here, or this guy had 111 tackles there. You know, like you're gambling on upside that wasn't flashed a ton with some of their portal guys on defense. Look, Bobby Hauck's defenses at Montana were by and large excellent. 2 years ago in 2023, they lost in the championship game. It was a great defense. I think it was the SP Plus number 2 defense in America on the FCS level. Coached under Rocky Long. He was the special teams coordinator about like a decade ago or so, after UNLV didn't work out for Bobby Hauck. And so I like the idea of going more confusing if you don't have the obvious star power, and the 3-3-5 can be that. The other thing I like about where Illinois is on defense, because they were pretty much a mess there last season, especially in their bigger games. And they were just a mess because they couldn't get off the field. They couldn't figure out ways.
Third downs, man. Third downs were horrible.
Yeah, the pass rush wasn't there. They had good players, but they couldn't get off the field. They were beat up a bunch. The thing that I like is, if we're going to talk about like the gauntlet that is Arkansas's schedule or Michigan's schedule, Illinois does have Oregon and Ohio State in terms of obviously good offenses, but short of that, it's pretty good. When you look at Illinois' schedule, now, we obviously don't know if this schedule is tough or not in, early March, but in terms of like known quantities on a roster, the Oregon offense will be tough for Illinois, although I believe that game's in Champaign at least. And the Ohio State offense should be really good once again. But if you're able to teach this offense, this shift to a 3-3 or defense, shift to a 3-3-5, if some of these portal guys work out, I'm not crazy about this once again in terms of a 2 deep. But it's interesting to me because we have seen Illinois teams, namely like 2-3 years ago, with Ryan Walters or whoever, that they're able to get results even if they don't look great against the best teams on the schedule. Illinois fans are never going to be upset about an 8-4 or 9-3 season.
No. And you bring up Ryan Walters. I'm glad you did, because there is a common thread. And the common thread is, if you recall those defenses, really if you recall what Bielema has tried to do on defense since he got there, he has really emphasized the negative plays.
Yeah.
He has really emphasized trying to create a high havoc defense, and that is absolutely what Bobby Hauck brings here. His defenses are almost entirely built around forcing negative plays and turnovers.
Aggressive attacking mentality, I think, was literally said in the press conference. Yeah.
The other thing that I really like, and we talk about not nearly enough here because, well, obvious reasons, but he's off the Rocky Long.
Yeah, no, I mentioned it. Yeah.
Did you mention that?
Yeah, it was
sorry,
like 2015 or something. He was a special teams coordinator for San Diego State. Yeah.
So he's done a really good job at Montana, kind of perfecting the 3-3-5 defense. And I think if nothing more, if it's a defense that confuses opponents and is built so much around creating negative plays and some of those turnovers, that's a good place to be. He's obviously a guy with a lot of experience. Again, was on a bit of a retirement, but coming back for more here. Another bite at the apple with Brett Bielema in Illinois.
Yeah, we saw it last year, right? The Rocky Long tree with Danny Gonzalez at Arizona coming in and getting immediate results with that kind of shift if it works out. And you have the personnel, namely like a nose tackle you can count on, hybrid players you can count on. But I think it's going to be must-watch TV.
Give me the sound.
Will you protect this house? I will.
Ohio State hired Arthur Smith.
They did.
Arthur Smith from the NFL as their offensive coordinator. 17-year NFL vet. Was the coach for the Falcons. That didn't go well. Was recently the Steelers' offensive coordinator. He is the only modern NFL play caller with a 1,000-yard rusher in 7 straight seasons across 3 different franchises, Dan. Early indications are that he's going to play a little bit more bully ball than we've been accustomed to seeing at Ohio State.
Yeah.
What is your reaction to this hire? Because let me be honest, I heard Arthur Smith, and I felt similar to the way I felt last year when we found out that Matt Patricia was going to be coaching the defense. Matt Patricia just got an extension. Matt Patricia did a famously good job with the defense in year 1 for Ohio State. So maybe I shouldn't have that same reaction, but I, for whatever reason, did. How do you feel about Arthur Smith?
It seems that Ryan Day wants to lean into what he started doing more of last season with heavier personnel groups, and they were sort of inconsistent running the ball the first half of the season, it seemed, and with Bo Jackson developed into a more consistent type offensive team. It just, if they're going to lean into what they were doing last year, and look, you can score a ton of points in heavier personnel, especially if you have versatile tight ends and you get mismatches and, you have a one-man wrecking crew in Jeremiah Smith, the single best offensive skill player in the country as a starting point, right? That's going to occupy a certain amount of defensive gravity on every single snap. And so if you're able to get more creative perhaps than they were last year with Brian Hartline running the offense in the running game, then they're going to be nearly impossible to beat. They were not the type of like speed, wide open passing jugular offense last year at all times like they had been in previous seasons. And they still last year had Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss, Max Clare. Like they had guys to run whatever system they saw fit. Offensive line was inconsistent last year at times. It looks like it should be a deep, experienced unit this year, and they got a lot of versatile guys who can play at different places. So really, I think they're just leaning into, at best, creative bully ball with multiple tight ends, because that's the sort of Arthur Smith calling card. And when he was only running offenses, I think it was with the Titans, whatever it is, 10, 12 years ago, it was Derrick Henry, right? That was the Arthur Smith Titans experience. They were basically impossible to stop. So they have young running backs. I don't think Bo Jackson's playing in the spring. I want to say it's a shoulder surgery situation. But if Julian Saint's able to take those next steps, made a couple of mistakes in those big games, especially early on in those games, if he's trusted more to lead an at times more wide open offense, but is still going to be in a situation where he's picking and choosing when he takes shots, they'll be in a good spot if they're running the ball, right? That there's just going to be play action opportunities. They brought in more tight ends from, I want to say, Ohio and Northwestern in this cycle. I think the defense is going to once again be excellent. It's a little bit thinner. They took some hits on that defense. There's less wiggle room on that defense just because the depth isn't necessarily where it was. But that's happened to everybody. That's happened to Georgia. That's happened to Oregon. That's happened to Bama, whatever. Take your pick. So it's not unique to Ohio State. I think I like the hire, right? Like he is definitely a good football coach. It's now going to be a matter of, are he and Ryan Day on the same page? Are they going to abandon things that aren't working too late or at the right time? Or is his fresh look at an offense, given his high-level experience, going to make Ohio State into an even bigger, dominant machine? So I think I like this a good deal.
I like it. I'm curious about it, though, because in terms of an offensive philosophy, it is a bit of a 180 from where they've been.
But last year they leaned into this a lot more.
Last year they leaned into it more, and they were good at it when they leaned in.
Yes and no.
Mostly good at it. But, this isn't going to be a system that I think is dictated by how good the receivers are.
Right.
I think this is going to be Arthur Smith playing a little bit more bully ball than we're used to. I mean, he is very much about multi-tight end sets. He's very much about under center and play action. He's very much about physical downhill runners, as evidenced by the number that I read out a moment ago. So if you're looking to build more of a bruising, physical, let's say weatherproof offense, then this is a guy who I think can help you get there. And clearly they've got enough talent to do kind of whatever they want. But I'm curious to see how Jeremiah Smith is utilized. I don't suspect they're going to take him out of the equation altogether. That would be foolish. That's not why they hired Arthur Smith. But if we see a little bit more balance, heavier sets, that will look different to the eye for people who have followed Ohio State through, the Heartline years,
They did do this last year, though. There was a lot of heavier sets last year.
There was. There absolutely was.
Played a lot slower. Yeah.
There absolutely was. And, there's a question of whether or not they were playing slower because the season is longer. They're trying to preserve, trying to ease how many miles are going on the tires.
Totally.
But this, to me, is, I think, a very clear indication of this is who we are now. We want to be this physical team moving forward, and you hire Arthur Smith because you want to be that team with the wide zone rushes and whatnot. So I'm curious to see. I mean, it's good news, I think, if you're Bo Jackson, provided he's healthy. It's really good news if you're in that running back room for Ohio State because that's going to be a point of emphasis. And I think there are many Ohio State fans that listen to this show that have written into us that would welcome that.
And by the way,
on the rushing side of things,
maybe difficult defensive schedule for Arthur Smith to prove this against. And obviously they basically had no trouble last year through the regular season. Obviously the Texas game was very close early. Texas, a clear top 15 team last season. At Texas this year, at Iowa, at Indiana, at USC for whatever USC's defense is worth. They host Oregon and Michigan. So there's a lot of defense to contend with, especially up front, perhaps, right? We can't with certainty say anything because there's so many changes to a lot of these teams, but there are many teams with less seeming on their schedule defensively than what Ohio State has. But I imagine to a T, all of those teams are quite worried about what Ohio State could potentially offer.
We got 2 left. Give me the sound one more time, please.
I will.
Let's talk about Chad Morris, baby.
Must we?
Chad Morris back like he never left Clemson in the first place. Chad Morris was the architect, partially the architect, of those Clemson offenses, the ones that were really good back in 2011 through 2014. Yes, they weren't great in 2014, but he replaces Garrett Riley. Mm-hmm. They're bringing him back to hopefully modernize an offense that's kind of gotten a little stagnant.
You're all about your nostalgia picks, by the way, with these coordinators, right?
I am.
Jason Beck staying with.
I'm in my feels, man.
Whittingham.
It's the off season.
Coach Boom back to Texas, and now Chad Morris.
Ron
back
Roberts
to
is
Clemson.
the coach's coach.
Sure.
The guy you put up on the porch in Applebee's.
Yeah, of course.
Offense was kind of predictable at Clemson, wasn't it?
I would say so, yeah.
Clemson went 7-6 last year. They lost the Pinstripe Bowl to Penn State, who I will talk about next. Per the SP Plus, this was the most average Clemson offense since 2021, and before that, 2014. Especially bad on third downs.
Oh, yeah.
In the red zone, the line was very average. The ground game never got off the ground. The passing game was a lot of short stuff. Not as much short stuff as we have seen, but still a lot of short stuff. Dabo is still rolling with this plan of building from within. They did take 10 transfers, mostly along the defensive line and in the secondary, but, he's at least shown a willingness to bring some of those guys in. I think the good news for Clemson is this, before I even get to Chad Morris, very workable schedule.
Sure.
This is a very workable schedule if you're the Clemson Tigers, if you're a Clemson fan. I will add, they may have the biggest look-ahead spot in the entire ACC, maybe the entire country.
Okay.
Last week of September, on the road in the hinterlands against Cal, before coming back home the next week to square off against the Miami Hurricanes.
It's a lot, yeah. Tosh and Cal and JKS, yeah.
Clemson is still in a very advantageous spot because of the talent that they have on hand. And they're in a conference that's really, really wide open.
Yeah.
But the pressure is on now because it does feel like a program that's been leaking a little bit of oil.
See, I think the pressure is fully off.
You do? Why?
Cade Klubnik is gone, right? The NFL guys are gone. They've made a bunch of changes. Now, look, if you're going to hire Chad Morris, you're signaling that you thought he was one of the keys to big explosive offenses early. But I don't know, new quarterback, a bunch of transfers. I just think expectations have been reset at Clemson.
I would welcome feedback from the Clemson community on that one.
You think Clemson is expecting to make a deep playoff run, which is where Clemson expectations were a few years ago?
I think Clemson fans are expecting to get back to what they've grown accustomed to with Clemson, which is not 7-5 in the regular season.
They were your number one team. How many months ago? 8, 7?
That's probably like 12 at this point. But
August. That's 7-8 months ago. That was so your expectation last year for Clemson.
I mean, I was all in on Clemson this time last year.
Yeah, you expected them in the national championship game. So maybe your expectations haven't changed, but I think maybe Clemson community expectations may have changed.
So here's what we know about Chad Morris coming back to Clemson. Chad Morris has been other places since his most recent stay in Clemson, South Carolina. But his first tour of duty was very notable for just running at a crazy fast tempo.
Yeah.
He has since said that he's learned a lot. He still wants to play with tempo, but it's going to be a little bit more deliberate. It's not going to be just going fast for the sake of going fast, the way maybe it was before. Now it is going to be a little bit more deliberate about when they use the tempo, hopefully in a strategic way. So that's the first thing I think that may be a little bit different. The second thing is the running game. The running game uses a lot of 12 personnel, right, with the 2 tight ends and the 1 running back.
Mm-hmm.
He uses pre-snap motion. He calls it eye candy to create some sort of a physical rushing. Everybody's got a physical rushing attack, right? Everybody wants to play downhill and be brutal and physical and all that, but he uses a lot of this window dressing stuff to try and confuse defenses, get guys out of position, and hopefully use that to his advantage. And then the other thing that I found most interesting about Chad Morris in reading some of his comments, he sort of made it an edict that they're going to take at least 3 deep shots per quarter.
Yeah, I've seen that before. Yeah.
I don't necessarily like putting the number on it. I feel like even though it's really early in the cycle, why are you telling people that? Don't tell them that. Doesn't that give the game away a little bit? But he wants to take more deep shots. He wants to consistently stretch the field. He wants to make the offense more explosive. I don't hate that schematically. I feel like we've been waiting for that. I can't tell you how many times we have talked about on this show Clemson's lack of the 50-50 receiver who can go up there and win contested catches. It directly correlates to their downfall as an offense.
Sure.
They just haven't really had that. Now, I think they've got those guys now, but I think they need to water and feed that philosophy a little bit more to get back to where they once were. So I like what I'm hearing. Chad Morris is obviously a guy who was successful way back when with Clemson, albeit, 15 years ago now. But in theory, the philosophy here, I think, matches pretty well with where Clemson probably needs to go next. So I'm encouraged by this. The schedule's in place. We know the talent's in place. Quarterback, TBD.
Chris Vezina.
TBD on Chris Vezina. But otherwise, I think just from a really high level in terms of what they are saying publicly, I think Clemson fans would probably agree with me that this feels like the direction they need to go.
I know you're attracted to these nostalgia hires. I don't know. It just feels like they're moving backwards.
You think he's a retread.
I just think they're moving backwards. And it doesn't mean Chad Morris doesn't know what he's doing. It doesn't mean Chad Morris can't succeed.
He's not going to be a head coach.
I know.
He's not going to be a head coach. He's just going to be a coordinator.
It seems to do a nice job at Texas State last year, running their passing game, right? Receivers and passing game coordinator. They were very successful downfield. I have every reason to believe it could work. I'm just never really a fan of looking backwards in this way. But I don't know.
Give me the sound one more time, Dan.
You protect this house.
I will.
Final coordinator. Whole new thing going on
Okay.
at the Pennsylvania State University.
Oh, some Taylor Mauser talk?
Give me some Taylor Mauser talk.
Okay. So we don't know what he needs to improve upon with Penn State players. But Penn State players are actually Iowa State players, if my understanding is correct.
There are a lot of Iowa State holdovers here as part of this project now. So Taylor Mauser is going to be the new offensive coordinator at Penn State. He is a longtime Matt Campbell assistant dating back to their Toledo days in the year of our Lord 2015. This will just be his third year as an offensive coordinator, but I think the results have been there. Did have that 11-win season back in 2024. That was his first year as full-time offensive coordinator. So I watched a recent episode of The Audible with our friends Stu and Bruce and Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one was just Stu and Ralph, but Stu was lamenting the fact that I guess on a recent article he did where he graded coaching hires, there seemed to be a lot of negativity around Matt Campbell in the comment threads. And I find that curious because everything I have heard talking to people who root for Penn State, who cover Penn State,
Right.
The vibes that I have detected have all been pretty positive.
Are you telling me putting an enormous amount of stock into anonymous commenters is misguided?
I'm just saying. I'm not saying Stu's
You're on the
wrong. I'm
ground,
just
Ty.
saying,
You're in the Lehigh Valley.
I have not detected any of those vibes here in
I haven't
non-comment
seen
thread.
on a national level. Everybody seems to be pretty high on Matt Campbell and Penn State.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's a good hire.
Yeah.
For anybody out there who still doubts the move, the quickest way to shut down the naysayers is to build an offense that is more cohesive and explosive. Because the context here is that Andy Kotelnicki, try as he might to do that, he was an offensive line guy. That was his pedigree.
Yeah.
Followed Lance Leipold around, built great rushing offenses, did it at Kansas. He still is super creative, but the crux of that system was building a ground game. And I think in hindsight, we can say, looking back, that maybe Drew Aller wasn't the best fit for that offense. You know, like I made the comment the first time we saw Bo Prabula, and I know I took a lot of flack for it, but I still don't think I was totally wrong in saying that maybe Bo Prabula would have been a better fit for that.
Yeah.
As he goes completely silent over there.
Yeah. You're entitled to your opinion. You have the floor.
But so here's the irony is, and where I'm going with this, is now with the Taylor Mauser era in State College, a guy like Drew Aller actually might be a better fit for this system.
Okay.
Like, this is a system now that's going to be a lot less oop-de-oop. It drove some Penn State fans crazy. We're not going to see all the pre-snap stuff. We're going to see very few of the screen passes. I think it's something like 6% of the dropbacks at Iowa State were screen passes.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see the jet sweeps. You're not going to see the random wildcat formations. It's not to say this offense is not complex. It's just not going to be as chaotic.
Right.
And so from the Penn State side of things, what I'm about to say should be music to your ears. This is an offense that uses the tight end as the engine for the whole thing. That's why they bring in Ben Brahmer from Iowa State. A very important get via the transfer portal. Taylor Mauser's also been a tight end coach since 2021. If you've watched the Clones at all, you know that they like the tight end. That's central to the whole project.
Sure.
Secondly, still wants to build the physical ground game.
Don't we all, though, Ty?
Well, apparently so. We're talking through it guy by guy here.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to want to build the ground game, but his offense is very much predicated around the physical ground game, which is why they're bringing over Carson Hansen, another guy from Iowa State, as well as vertical shots deep.
Yep.
He wants to play off that running game with play action, with vertical shots. He's not doing a Chad Morris and saying how often he wants to do it, mind you. But this is what Penn State fans have been clamoring for. This is why I say this should be music to the ears. Because these philosophies just weren't there. It was a lot of oop-de-oop in the running game. It was a lot of what's Drew Aller going to do next. It was a lot of, can they take the top off the defense? Do they have the receivers to take the top off the defense? That part of it, by the way, I think is still TBD. But at least they're going to try a little bit more, and at least I think you know what you're getting with this offensive coordinator. Oh, by the way, they're bringing over the board. Thank you very much. The best of all Roccos. He knows the system. He's played well in this system. So I bring all this up because if you are a Penn Stater listening to this, your response is probably, hey, why didn't we hire Taylor Mauser instead of Andy Kotelnicki in hindsight?
Yeah.
So I like where they're going with this. I like that there is familiarity between the coaches. I like that he's basically bringing over the whole team from Iowa State. They should be able to hit the ground running, and they've got a really advantageous schedule this year.
That's true. The schedule is great.
So it's going to look different. It's going to feel different. Hopefully it feels like they hit the ground running and it's not discombobulated the way it was for long stretches over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I am encouraged by this hire, not only the Matt Campbell hire, but the Taylor Mauser hire. The fact that they are retaining him as part of the staff that comes over from Iowa State, I think that's a really, really big get for Penn State. So from where I stand, the vibes are strong, Stu. I can't speak for the comment thread, but everyone I've talked to, all the reading I've done, the Penn State community seems pretty jazzed up about this one.
Yeah, and to your point, to all the haters out there, Iowa State scored nearly 20 points against Arizona State and Jeff Sims in a loss. So I think as close to 20 points as you can get, right? They scored 19 points against ASU in a loss to Jeff Sims last year.
Look, the conversation about Iowa State playing consistent football and not dropping games in a dumb fashion or not playing under expectations, that will be a subject for another day.
Okay.
I share those concerns, okay? But I am saying bigger picture from a philosophical standpoint.
Sure.
I'm doing my little thinking man pose over here with the fist on the chin. From that standpoint, I like this.
Okay.
As I have all of these hires that we've talked about, apparently.
Yeah. Last year's Iowa State offense was not that good. Like, they were fine. They were like a top 50-ish, but not an offense that was just working its way through the Big 12 with an experienced quarterback. Not explosive, although they were very explosive the year before, and not good in the red zone, which hopefully are like the two big calling cards of an offensive coordinator, right? Able to find explosive plays, able to score touchdowns in the red zone. And so that would be the concern against, I guess, a normal schedule, but Penn State's schedule this year isn't, at first glance, not the most challenging in the world.
And I mean, the red zone stuff is I've got my hand on my face here because I'm with you. And you would think if you've got an all-conference caliber tight end, that would be that should fix it. Should fix a lot of it. But or even a guy like a Carson Hansen, who was a touchdown machine the year prior.
Yeah.
You would think that would make the red zone woes go away,
right?
In large part, but it didn't. So that will be, I think, a very fair question.
Also extremely average on third down last year.
Very average.
Yeah.
So it's not bulletproof.
No.
But I'm just saying, given where Penn State's been, given how discombobulated and out of sorts the offense felt, I'd say at a minimum from the Penn State perspective, You will not have to throw things at the TV, scream into a pillow
Maybe.
because, well, maybe, I don't know. But hopefully you will not have to do any of that because we're not going to have the random, wildcat formation, not going to be lining up Nick Singleton at quarterback in a high leverage second down and long situation.
Yeah.
Some of those tricks that they tried to pull out at random spots throughout the course of last year.
Sure.
That type of logic should hopefully be going back to Kansas with Andy Kotelnicki, who I still like, by the way, but just may not have been quite the fit we expected when he came up to start.
Yeah. Look, if nothing else, given the number of players coming over from Iowa State, given the coaching staff from Iowa State, they're going to hold their own in the Big 12 next year, right? They're going to be a hard Big 12
They'll be a
out.
hard out in the Big 12, yeah.
I mean, we'll see. They're just a giant mystery to me. I don't have an opinion, truly, other than the snark I like throwing at you. I don't have a strong opinion about Taylor Bowser and the Penn State offense beyond, they're doing the thing where they bring over the coach and the staff and a bunch of players, and it's on a big level, on a big stage with Penn State.
I just think in terms of philosophy, what Mauser brings, it is what they kind of needed over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
That philosophy would have worked really well with what they had the last 2 years. Now, they obviously went to the college football playoff semifinal. They lost close to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a good team, but it was even a team then that we had questions about the offense and are they explosive? Are they not explosive?
Yeah.
How did they get more out of this thing with Drew Aller, who's apparently ripping up the scouting combine right now?
Born to rip up the combine. Yeah.
Born to rip up the scouting combine. So, in theory, I like the direction things are going.
Right there with Colorado, Ty. They were right there. Iowa State gave Colorado all they could handle last year. Yeah.
But that was Iowa State. This is Penn
That's
State.
Iowa State. Now. Yeah, this is a totally different roster.
Let's leave it there. Solidverbal@gmail.com, as always, is the email. You can go to the website now that I fixed the damn form. You can also hit us up across any of the social platforms, anywhere you can leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you do not miss any of our episodes. And if you liked us enough to at least entertain the idea of supporting the team, you can go to verballers.com. That's the Patreon where you get ad-free episodes, get all the stuff a little bit early, Discord access, so on and so forth. Or you can go on out to the merch store. I think it's merch.solidverbal.com or just solidverbal.com/store. Either one will take you there. Going out, buy something. If you find something that you like, that, of course, also helps support what we do.
Yes, absolutely.
That's all we got for today. Wherever you may be, thank you for tuning in. Hope your day is going well. Please make sure you tell your friends about the show. We will be back on Thursday. In the meantime, for that guy over there, Dan, for myself, Ty, as always, stay solid.
Peace.